Okay. Hi, welcome. Hopefully this is streaming over there on BackerKit. Let me go check and see if it is. Oh my gosh. So crazy. Welcome. I'm going to be reading the first two chapters of Weave of a Thousand Lies for you. So, yeah, let's see if that's going on. Let's see. Okay, sorry. It says 107. Oh, dang. I messed up. Hold on. Let me check and see if I can get that edited. I don't know why it says what. Oh, let's see. That's 9:08. So 9:30. Sorry, p.m. Ugh. All right. Well, we're just messing up all sorts of things today, aren't we? Nine. Let's see. Let me put that in there today. All right. All right. All right. Hopefully that works. We're going to see. Yay. Okay. It says we're live. Okay. Great. Sorry. Just had to fiddle with some things there. All right. Great. If you're just joining us, welcome to where I read two chapters of Weave of a Thousand Lies. We are at 56 backers. We are less than $200 away from our next stretch goal, which is those beautiful sprayed edges. So I'm super excited. You guys have been so wonderful and glorious to participate in that and to be a part of that. And I'm so grateful that you have supported me, supported my work, and I'm super glad. Okay, so today we're going to read the first chapters of Weave of a Thousand Lies from my book. If you don't know much about it, it is a crown to save. Let's see, a plague to cure, a crown to save, and a romance out of time. People have compared it to Mistborn and Outlander because of the heist and time travel elements. It is no spice, and it is definitely chemistry and kisses, because having no spice doesn't mean there's not a lot of romance. It just means that there's no explicit romance. It's chemistry and kisses. So there's a lot of chemistry, and it stops short of kisses. Okay. Burning, burning, always burning, smoke choked the sun and turned the cerulean sky a dark ashen color. If Linnea could find the cure to the plague ravaging the land, she could stop her people returning to Mother Spinner in the form of ash through the incinerators. Thick white cordings hung from her arm. She coughed, ducking her chin deeper into the cloth covering her face. She climbed the stone steps to the principal palace, set in the middle of this valley, the focal point of London City. In all her 16 summers, she had never smelled such a wretched stench of smoke. She must find the cure and stop the incinerators. At the top of the stairs, she stopped at the massive metal doors towering overhead, the height of over 10 women. The grand entrance. No one passed these portals by mortal strength alone. In the Great Siege, the crashed soldiers failed to open the doors, weighing hundreds of stones. With haste, she tugged the thinner white cordings hanging from her braided stitch-binding sash and tied the chain for strength of Mother Spinner. At the end of a series of complicated stitches, she completed it with a finishing knot. The white cording glowed yellow. She wrapped it around her arm. Power flowed through the tips of her fingers. The tingling sensation usually made her giggle, but not today. Grabbing the handle, she tugged. Even with the strength enhancement, she still strained with her might. With grating metal of stone on stone, the thick door eased open under her glowing grip. Wind rushed through the slit, rustling the cords folded over her arm. Slipping inside to the vestibule, she closed the door behind her, saddened that in other times the portal was left open. Power drained from her as the knotted cording around her arm dulled to a gray hue. Untying the spent cording, she let it hang from her waist, good only for tying back hair. She ran her fingers through the cordings of her stitch-binding sash, letting the soft linen tickle her fingers. Sighing, she shook her head. More cords were gray than white. Gone were the days when she could refresh her sash easily. Without enough workers to harvest linen and to make new cordings, she must conserve their power. Linnea stiffened her aching shoulders for the work before her. Her Mamu, the queen, needed these cordings immediately. Inside, she removed her face covering and inhaled the scent of lavender and lemon and other herbal remedies used to wash and clean. In before times, the large, windowless vestibule had welcomed dignitaries from foreign lands, the Barbadan to the south, Utrica from the north, and the Moray to the east. Now, cots and makeshift pallets stuffed with chaff lined the walls. Thread, lit with glow, offered little light. Linen curtains hung between the sufferers for a modicum of privacy. In her haste, she tripped on a lump of protruding stone on the floor. A few cordings slipped from her arms. Scrunch! She could hear her mother say she couldn't tell her mother they were sullied. Aren't princesses supposed to be graceful? Linnea spun to see the bearer of the voice. A young man stood near the rear of the vestibule. Though a head taller than her, he appeared no older than her 16 summers. Hair the color of tow partially hid his blue eyes. He lowered his choir where he jotted notes and approached her. She shifted the weights of the cords to the other arms. Carrying large bundles isn't covered in my royal training. She narrowed her eyes, struggling to control the unwieldy bundle. You could help. The boy didn't have the accent of the lowlands of London, yet he didn't wear the Highland wool vest. Oh, yes, her mammy required all visitors to burn their native clothing and wear the linen tunic of London. Keeping his cool gaze on her, he bent and retrieved the falling cordings. I do as I'm told in London. His voice held a sharpness, a bitterness that accentuated his lower brow. You command, we obey. Ah, yes, Linnea eyed him with a hint of pity. He wasn't unpleasant to look at for a Highlander. If his face hadn't held such disdain, and that unnerved her. No one in London looked at her like that, blue eyes partially squinted, hatred blazing in his gaze. You must be one of the delegates from Crash. Her mother invited them. Linnea had yet to meet them all. She'd been too busy tending the ill. Finding the cure to this wretched plague occupied all her free time. Indeed. He tucked the quire under his elbow and bundled the falling cordings over his arm with a certain air of confidence. He must be someone of importance. What is your name? She asked. Kemp. He brushed back his bangs, but they fell again into his eyes. Follow me, Kemp. She nodded toward the next set of doors leading to the great hall. No need to introduce yourself, he said, his voice as salty as the winds from the deltas of Barbadan. What do you mean? Linnea stopped and faced him. Everyone knows who you are. He lifted his chin. Your lowness. With biting acid in his voice, he bowed, his head nearly touching the stone floor. Then he stood upright, challenging her with his gaze. Caught off guard, Linnea ducked her chin into her masked smile. If it hadn't been for his sour expression, his wit would have made her laugh. She straightened her spine, speaking with a tone of indifference. All right, then, come with me. Frowning, he lumbered after her through the doors of the great hall. Inside, curtains separated the room into compartments, each with a fallen writhing in a cot. High above them, tainted daylight poured in from the arched windows, leaving faint patterns of tracery on the polished stone floor. Before the illness, women in swirling gowns with layers upon layers of tightly woven fabrics danced with men to stringed instruments and feasted on their harvest. Linnea yearned for those carefree days. She could almost hear the folk tunes and taste the memories. Those celebrations were far removed from the sickness and moans before her. By royal decree, her mother canceled all celebrations, including Linnea's official betrothal announcement. A pain shot her at the thought. She should have been betrothed to Rhett by now. Halting in her haste to cross the great hall, she nodded to a pair of young attendants dressed in brown tunics crossing her path. Dull gray cloth wrapped their clean hair. The two scurried about with a few cordings ready to stave off pain or improve the mind. Good morning, Princess. Each one bobbed their head and ran a hand down the stitch-binding cordings hanging from their woven sashes in greeting. All the attendants were at least in their 15th summer. Those ever over 70 summers and those under 10 summers were too vulnerable. Even the middle-aged suffered terribly. The queen was one of the few people over 20 summers attending the sick, which gave Linnea tremors in her stomach. Should the queen fall ill, who would rule? The thought sent shivers down her spine. Surely Linnea was too young. Linnea returned the greeting with a swipe of her own sash. Good morning, Stay and Staff. Have you been here all night? Staff nodded. Bags sagged under her eyes. You stay longer and help more than we do. Maybe the cordings will work today. Perhaps. A sting of tears formed in Linnea's eyes. So far, none of their stitch binding healed the illness. A lump formed in her throat. Let me know of any improvement. She hoped her voice held more confidence than she felt. So far, Linnea's experiments had proved fruitless. Staff and Stay bowed, nodded, and ducked under the linen partition. At the end of the great hall, Linnea opened a door. This way, Kemp followed. What are these cords for? Hesitating at the threshold, Linnea bit her lip against the question. Her mother specifically forbade her from divulging any information about stitch binding to the visitors from Crash. Without being blessed by Mother Spinner or Stook, the Crash couldn't chain the small cording with any power. Even so, describing stitch binding to outsiders was forbidden. Sorry to disturb you, Princess. Someone tapped her on the shoulder, clad in a gray collector's tunic. Rhett! Distracted with the cordings, she hadn't noticed him. Tight lines crossed his face. Her heart ached for him. We have another one. Scowling at Kemp, he motioned for her to follow him and stalked toward the far side of the hall. Thank you, I'll be right there. Closing the door, Linnea swallowed hard. Should she take the cordings to her mother or tend to the sick first? Her mother insisted the need was urgent, but the collectors only sent Linnea the worst cases. She turned to the Crash boy, narrowing her eyes. Kemp, was it? Would she get into trouble for allowing him to hold the cordings? No one else was nearby, and she didn't want to lug the cordings in to tend to the sick. What a hassle that would be. Surely he wouldn't defile them. Will you promise to take care of these? She raised the bundle, settling them into a chair. Promises were the highest form of respect. Lindens made promises to Mother Spinner, to partners in business, and to those they loved. If you command, he mocked her with a deep bow. It's not a command, it's a two-way promise, and I promise no harm will come to you for holding them. Give me your hand. She held out her fingers. Raising a brow, he clasped her palm. At his touch, a buzz went through her. Alarmed, she wrapped a cording around their two hands. Repeat after me. What we say, our word is bond. We are bound by word and cord. We promise to be of one accord. He repeated the words. They unclasped their hands. With a deep sigh, she handed him the bundle of trussing cordings. It was only for a few minutes. Leaving them unattended would be worse. Desperate people stole them, hoping to use them for loved ones. He was better than nobody. Do not let them out of your sight and wait here. Leaving him by the door, she clutched her stitch-binding sash and followed Rhett to see what fresh horror awaited her. Chapter 2. This is from Kemp's point of view. Left alone with an arm full of cords, Kemp stood by the great hall door, shaking his head. Lindens. He hated being at the princess's beck and call. By the great hunter, now what could he do? Just stand there and hold these stupid cords that made the Lindens so powerful? If only he knew how to use them, he would run back to Crash right now. Yet to the Crash they were useless without the knowledge of the knots. He tightened his jaw, the ache in his arms increasing from the load. Someday he would learn the Linden secrets and make them pay for what they had done to Crash. Until then, he would bide his time. He stared in awe at the palace. He'd never seen such a great building with room upon rooms, and more than 3 levels. Few constructed buildings this grand in Crash, although the stone for this palace must have been stolen from the mountains centuries ago. Frib came from behind a pillar, holding his nose. God, this place stinks. You smell lowlander cleaning methods. Kemp recognized the lavender and the honey, but not the other sharp-scented smell. A plant they didn't have in the colder highlands, perhaps? I don't like it here. Frib scowled at the beds. Sick people make me sad. Gawking, he motioned to the ropes in Kemp's hand. Are those the sacred cords? How did you get them? The princess ordered me to hold them. He made sure to sneer when he said princess, but he clutched them to his chest. Frib leaned closer, narrowing his gaze and shooting glances at the curtains hanging between the sick beds. Shall we steal one? The thought crossed my mind. Would they even miss one? Then he could practice. But these were thicker than the braided belts they wore around their waists. But I also like living. Lindens were barbaric, and the punishment for theft would be swift and sure. Inhaling, he shifted the weight of the cords. This time, the time would come. He must be patient. Exhaling, Frib tapped his choir, relaxing his shoulders. I wish this whole plague was over. I want to go home and eat mutton stew. He smacked his lips. Kemp sighed with relief. Good. Frib hasn't guessed the real reason the High Alder asked them to tally and record the names of the fallen. Kemp had more important task, to discover the secrets of stitch binding. The Lindens are fools. Kemp caught sight of the princess again. Her long, curly hair was swept back in a series of braids, knotted together like a net-like pattern. She moved gracefully and smiled with genuine kindness. The opposite of everything he'd learned about Lindens. It must be an act. Fred slapped him on the shoulder. Stop staring at the princess. I'm not staring. In front of a curtain, she talked to a group of collectors. Rhett brought her a small girl in a wool dress, a crash girl. Kemp stepped forward, wanting to protect the girl. He didn't want her in their hands. Yes, you are, and it's creepy, Frib elbowed him in the ribs. She doesn't even know you exist, and she has a fiancé. Finally breaking his stare, Kemp tensed. Rhett, even saying his name soured his mouth. They're not officially engaged. He'd seen her tend to the old and the young, Crash or Linden, never a complaint from her lips. But she still was Linden and therefore evil. But still, if only he could see how she used stitch binding. Only the plague keeps them apart, Fridge sniffed and rubbed his big nose. As soon as the plague is cured, they'll be betrothed. Kemp shot him a scowl. Where do you hear such gossip? Fridge shrugged. The kitchen. Kemp focused on the little Crash girl. He had to help her, make sure she didn't feel alone. Before he had left his mountain home, the High Alder asked him to ensure the Lindens didn't abuse his people. Although he hadn't seen anything worse than general disdain, Kemp was sure they hid darker secrets. The other collectors left, and but Rhett held back the fabric curtain for the girl. The princess followed her into the partitioned section of the great hall. But before Rhett could enter, another collector called him away. Rhett bowed and went with the others. What was the princess doing with the Crash girl? Hurting her? Performing a horrific stitch-binding experiment? He had to find out. Here, hold these. He dumped the armful of white cords onto Frib. I'll be back. Furrowing his brow, Kemp crossed to the linen room. Careful to move slowly, he quietly curled back the fabric to peek inside. The Crash girl. Who couldn't be more than 6 snows, stared with glassy eyes. The girl's nose burned red. She was at stage 3, forgotten. Under her arm was a ragged felted bunny, a typical toy for the Highlanders. As a boy, Kemp had loved a long forgotten stuffed shepherd dog. The princess knelt beside the girl, pointing to the bunny. Is this your friend? Twisting her gnarled hair, the girl slowly nodded. Does he have a name? Linnea touched a fevered cheek. Tucking in her lips, the girl lowered her brows and shrugged her thin shoulders. Does who have a name? The fallen couldn't remember their own names. Why ask for the toys? The girl clutched the bunny with one dangling eye, peeling felt and gaping seams. Bits of uncarded wool stuffing peeked through the felt, colored dingy and thinning. Clearly, it had seen better days. Slipping the toy from her arms, Linnea smiled and brushed the girl's matted hair from her eyes. She would have to burn it, like everything else that came into the palace. Gripping the curtain in his fist, Kemp held his breath against the coming action. But instead of taking the bunny to the incinerator, Linnea snipped a cording hanging from her belt. Let's see what we can do to help him. She placed a finger to her lips. Don't tell anyone. Holding the cords with 2 hands, she knotted it in a pattern. Kemp hungered to know. He wanted her to slow the action so that he could see it, learn it, and memorize the muscle movements. The small ringlet, no bigger than a bracelet, glowed yellow. Kemp watched in awe. He'd never seen stitch binding do that before. With a tired grin, Linnea slipped it over the bunny's head. The whole toy glowed white. An eye formed in the empty socket. Loose or missing threads tightened or reappeared. The worn patches became strong. The stuffing even plumped out again. Dirt and debris disappeared. It looked freshly made. Gasping silently, Kemp dropped his jaw, his heart racing. Incredible. His longing for this knowledge raged inside him. She tucked the bunny into the girl's arms. The girl's eyes lit up as if she received a new toy, curling her neck around it and hugging it tight. A new bunny! I'll name you Flopsy. Indeed, she'd forgotten it was hers. Dropping the curtain, he stepped back. What had he just witnessed? He couldn't understand. He turned and bumped into a heavy chest. Rhett scowled and grabbed him by the upper arm, pushing him inside the curtained area. What are you doing here, slub? When they entered, Linnea spun. Her expression turned from complete joy to suspicion. Heat flushed Kemp's face. Yanking his arms free of Rhett, he fumbled for words. What would the princess say? So there you have it. There's the first 2 chapters of Weave of a Thousand Lies. And, I love this story. It is written with a lot of love and a lot of, time that I have spent, laboring for this, and you will definitely enjoy reading this book. If you enjoy no spice, YA fantasy with kisses and chemistry, with cool magic systems that enjoy that involve um, textile fabrics, so textile arts. So good luck, enjoy, and goodbye. Thank you for being here.